Tech. Today, I'm joined by my co-host for the day, Arjun S. He's the founder of Metaforms, one of the co-founders. And this company just raised a $9 million Series A round led by Peak 15. The company is basically working in this space where they're trying to automate operations for these agencies that help with market research. And so they're using AI to do that. Initially, I thought it was pretty interesting because I've done a lot of market research myself, just exploring various industries here in India. But that is actually, that was my thought, that maybe you're serving business customers, right? Enterprise customers. But it's actually the people in between, the agencies who are doing market research on behalf of these companies. These are their clients. And so you're helping those agencies to automate their market research, which is a pretty interesting niche. And I'm looking forward to hearing more about it. But before we get into that, before we talk about you, we have to talk about what's new in Indian tech. And there's a lot of stuff that happened in the last 24 hours between Thursday, which was yesterday, and today, Friday. And so we're gonna get into everything here on Runtime. So the first thing that came across my radar was Maruti Suzuki is actually getting now into drones for the first time. I actually own a Maruti Celerio. That's the car that I drive. So I'm a big fan of Maruti. I think it's a great company, but I've never thought of them as a drone company. And up until now, they haven't been. But this company has now been approved to expand its business scope beyond automobile manufacturing for the first time. And so it's actually a bunch of different things that they want to start exploring now. It's drones, it's UAVs, it's unmanned aircraft systems, and new age technologies related to propulsion and control systems as well. Now, one thing that I was actually reading the story at one point of this company, Maruti Suzuki. Do you know about the story of this company? It's actually super interesting.
No, I don't think so.
It was started by Indira Gandhi's son. You heard about this?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I guess at one point he went to Europe and he was really inspired by Volkswagen, which is, I think the name itself translates to like car of the people. And so he was thinking, why doesn't India have a car of the people? And so he thought Maruti could potentially be that car. And the name itself, part of the name is Marut, which I believe translates to wind. And so I thought it was really interesting because now that they're moving into drones, they're actually leaning more into that name because they're going to be sending these drones up into the sky and they'll be moving like the wind. I don't know, just a little fun little connection that I saw here. Apart from drones, though, they're also going to be moving into a couple of other spaces as well. They've gotten approval now for a number of different things: vehicle leasing, subscriptions, shared mobility, used car sales, EV charging infrastructure, hydrogen and biogas trading, carbon credit monetization, and end-of-life vehicle recycling. So very interesting new chapter ahead of Maruti Suzuki, and I'm very curious to see where things go here. The next update that I have for you all is an employee of CoinDCX has been arrested now following this hack where $44 million were stolen from one of the company's cryptocurrency accounts. The employee in question here is Rahul Agarwal. He was arrested on July 26th by the police. And what happened here is it looks like hackers had gained access to Agarwal's system, his work system. And so they were able to siphon the $44 million through that access. How do they do this? Well, it looks like Rahul was using his office laptop for side gigs. And I know probably a lot of you watching might actually do the same, right? A lot of people have a side hustle. This is sort of a horror story of the worst possible case scenario where things just go really wrong when you're doing side gigs on your work system. So maybe avoid doing that in the future, especially if you work for a crypto company, because you are a target at that point. Now, Rahul is claiming that he was innocent and unaware of the theft. He admitted to moonlighting for between 3 and 4 private parties without knowing their backgrounds. He received a WhatsApp call from a German number about some files that were sent to him for completion. And so he suggested that maybe one of those files could have been a bait that let the hacker into his system. Also, it was found that 15 lakh rupees had been deposited into his bank account from an unknown source prior to the hack taking place, which is an interesting detail. And it'll be very interesting to see whether the investigation here reveals why that 15 lakh rupees was transferred into his account. Was it just because was it just a form of payment for his services? He was, again, moonlighting for a number of different individuals or companies, and so maybe it was just payment for the work that he was doing. But it looks like the police have made a statement here on behalf of the company. It says Rahul was on the permanent rolls of the company, and he had been given a laptop strictly for office work. He came under the scanner after the company found out that an unknown person had hacked into the system at 2:37 a.m. on July 19th and transferred one USDT to a wallet. That was just a test. And then around 9:40 a.m., the hacker siphoned off $44 million and transferred it to 6 wallets. So kind of an unfolding story here. It'll be interesting to see where this goes. And of course, I'll keep you all posted here on Runtime. Moving on to the next item though here, LAT Aerospace has unveiled their engine center in Bengaluru. This is coming to us actually from Dipender Goyal himself, posting on LinkedIn and X, saying that LAT is setting up a propulsion research team in Bengaluru to build an India-made gas turbine engine. He's an investor in the company. It's important to note that LAT is not part of Eternal, the parent company of Zomato. It's just an investment that Dipender Goyal has made himself as an angel investor. And LAT is aiming to build a made-in-India gas turbine engine from scratch. And so this dedicated research center in Bengaluru has labs for the following things: combustion, turbo machinery, thermal systems, and materials. And so Dipender Goyal has said, if this works, if we're able to build this engine, it changes everything. A full engine stack built locally, powering STOL. I'm not sure if it's STOL or STOL aircraft, not my domain. UAVs, remote connectivity, and self-reliance. So pretty cool. I'm not sure where this is going to be, where this center, this research center is going to be located in Bengaluru, but I'd definitely love to go and check it out at some point. Dipender, if you're watching this, which you probably aren't, but if anyone wants to share this with him, I'd love to swing by and do a little point of view tour using my Meta Ray-Bans. I think that'd be super cool. Next update here, this company Astra AI has shut down. 5 months after receiving an investment from Arvind Srinivas, Astra AI is shutting down. This is an AI-powered sales analytics platform for businesses for workflow execution. And one of the founders, Supreet Hegde, shared on LinkedIn saying, our journey began with an ambitious dream to automate all non-customer-facing tasks of sales reps. And our unique offering landed us 2 major clients without direct competitors, which is definitely very unique, very special to have no competition with the 2 clients that you have. But unfortunately, they did shut down. So the reasons he gave were lengthy sales cycles, especially as an early stage startup asking clients to trust us with sensitive data from platforms like Salesforce, Google Drive, Slack, and CLM, which is understandable, right? It's a new startup coming to you and saying, hey, we're going to plug in, connect to your system, and we're going to have access to all this information. You might be a little bit hesitant to give them access to all that information. Another reason given was AI agent hype. Many clients were just unsure of whom to trust or how to evaluate AI agents. It's a pretty new space. There's a lot of hype. There might be some bad actors as well. And so companies are being cautious when a company approaches them and says, hey, I've got an AI agent for you. They're like, well, you and 100 other companies that are also trying to sell me an agent, right? And then the third reason that he gave was co-founder misalignment. As co-founders, he said, we found ourselves at different crossroads regarding the pace of growth, which is actually one of the biggest reasons why startups fail, right? It's co-founder misalignment. So that's just the way things go. It looks like Supreet's co-founder, Ranjan Rajagopalan, is already working on a new startup, which is currently in stealth. I don't know. I mean, you've shut down a startup in the past as well. Oh, by the way, we need to connect your microphone. I'll let you work on that. We forgot to do that. But you've shut down a startup in the past. I don't think that there's anything wrong with shutting down. I think that the way that they've gone about it was very professional, right? They posted about it on LinkedIn. They said, look, this is what happened. These are the reasons why it happened. And we're shutting down, and probably they'll move on and build something else, each respectively as individual founders. And that's just the way things go sometimes. All right, next up here, we've got this social gaming platform called Stan. I have never used Stan before. I have used Discord, which is probably the next closest comparison. But this company has raised $8.5 million. And apparently it's one of the leading social gaming platforms in India. They've actually raised these funds from a number of very large Japanese companies, large players like Bandai Namco, Square Enix, Reason Holdings, and Google's AI Futures Fund. So what is Stan? Oh, and also Aptos Labs as well was one of their investors. And they also saw participation in this round from existing investors like General Catalyst, GFR Fund, T Accelerate Capital, and Pix Capital. So what are they doing? They want to be the go-to destination for gaming communities and creators outside of traditional metro markets. I think those metro markets are largely dominated by Discord at this point. But if you're in tier 2 or tier 3 India, then there's a good chance that you've never heard of Discord and you don't actively use it. And so that's the market that they're going after. They already have 25 million downloads, and they also have a growing user base in, like I said, tier 2 and tier 3 cities. So this is basically a social layer for gaming, but specifically mobile gaming, which I think is a space that Discord hasn't gone after as heavily, right? They're more of a PC gamer oriented platform where people who are gaming on their laptops as well. And so for Stan, it's not just about gameplay, it's also about conversation. It's about building a community of people that you play games with. And it's about identity as well, right? People, especially on Discord, I've seen a lot of people have a lot of identity wrapped up in their persona and the community that they built on Discord. And so it looks like Stan is going after a similar opportunity. So it'll be interesting to see where things go here. It is also a challenging space, I think, to have an app on a mobile device that is also simultaneously running a game. And in tier 2 and tier 3, you can expect a lot of people to have sort of mid to lower tier mobile phones. And so I think there will be a lot of hardware challenges for them too, as a company that's offering this platform of dealing with phones that have limited ability to run multiple things simultaneously, especially when it's a intensive process like gaming that sort of taxes the system. Okay, one more update for you all. And this actually, I just saw this a couple of hours ago when I woke up. There's a company called Kombai, and they're sort of relaunching their platform. They've been in business for a while. I think this company was launched in 2022, and they saw this big spurt of excitement and activity. I think it was a 2023 or maybe 2024 time period when they initially launched. And then ever since then, they've been quietly building their next big thing, which is an AI agent that is specifically for front-end development. So this has a specialized context engine and tooling. The agent outperforms state-of-the-art models. It also outperforms generic agents and real-world benchmarks. And it's compatible with all of the top IDEs that you all probably use, like VS Code, Cursor, Windsurf. And so what they're doing here, I mean, the reason why this thing works so well is that it's isolated for front end. So it's not going to mistakenly change your database or backend logic in any way. It's exclusively focused on your front end. And they've actually open sourced the data set so that folks can benchmark agents for complex front end tasks. So this company has one foot in San Francisco, another foot in Pune. That's where they're headquartered here in India. And they've been around, like I said, since 2022. And then back in 2023 is when they raised $4.5 million in their seed round. And so it looks like they're putting that money to good use now with this very exciting agent. So go check it out if you're a front-end developer. But now let's move into the meat of today's live stream, Metaforms. And I think, Arjun, the first thing that I want to talk about here, I mean, we briefly touched on it at the beginning of the conversation, what Metaforms does, but just break it down for me a little bit further. I think a lot of people are unfamiliar with the space that you operate in, sort of helping these market research agencies to automate the research that they're doing, the process by which they do their research, which involves a lot of real people doing surveys and even working with vendors, which I had to look into this. What is a vendor in this context? A vendor is a company that sources humans, right? So a business is going to say, okay, I need to do market research and I need to focus on this demographic, right? You know, male people in their late teens, and that's the demographic that I'm going after. And so I want to do my market research in that space. And so they'll go to an agency with that requirement. And then the agency actually has to find vendors who can provide them with those people, right? Those teenage guys that they're doing the research on. This is just one example, but help me to understand it further, because I'm sure there's a lot of gaps in my understanding even at this point.
Yeah. So you got it right. What Metaforms does is build AI agents that help automate market research agencies' operations specifically, right? So broadly for them, what happens is, hey, I can deliver project faster as an agency. I can sort of improve my operating margin. So very clear ROI. That also helps us sort of get into these larger agencies much faster, because you know clearly what you get when you buy Metaforms. It's not just a AI agent that you adopt and then figure out what you get out of it, but you sort of clearly know that, hey, today I take a month to deliver a project. If I adopt Metaforms, I can do that in a week, right? But yeah, I'll set some context of broadly what market research is and sort of who that is for, just for the larger audience. So let's say you're a brand like Nike, or let's say you're a Flipkart and so on, right? You constantly need to know what is going on with sort of your customers, your potential customers, and so on. A lot of that today happens, of course, with first-party data. So for a Flipkart, you know what people are searching for. So of course, that is a solved problem. But what you don't know still is, hey, I am Flipkart. What is people who use Amazon use, or what do people who go to grocery stores sort of prefer, and so on, so that you can go to these markets as well, right?
So competitive research.
Yeah, so that's one of them. And there are so many other aspects of it which you cannot tap into purely through first-party data, and that's where you depend on market research. So you find ways to get to these people that you otherwise cannot, right? And within this market research as an industry, of course, every brand wouldn't have that capability to do this. So it makes sense to have agencies that specialize in doing this. So as a brand, if you want answers to something, you figure out, hey, I want to do a pricing study. Let me go find an agency that does pricing study really well, and I'll sort of let them give me answers to questions I have, right? And of course, over time, these agencies also have evolved to sort of have a very clear structure. So usually these are agencies where they clearly do either qualitative, quantitative, or like a combination of these. So qualitative meaning they talk to people to discover things that you don't know initially, right? So you don't even know what questions to ask. These people might, do focus groups, interviews, and so on, and give you direction that you can then go deeper into. And then you might want to do quant studies as well. So you might want to know, hey, I know that these are sort of 5 hypotheses that I have, but I need to now validate them by talking to 1,000 people so that I know exactly what target demographic is broken down into these preferences and so on. And that's exactly what market research agencies help you do, right? And again, there are very clear roles. So this was very surprising to us when we entered market research for the first time. So we were very new to it. And we know that nobody wakes up and thinks about market research. It's a very niche industry, right? And for us, like a revelation was figuring out that, hey, there are these roles like survey programmer, data processor, there's a visualization and reporting team. And if you look at what they do, you'll find this very peculiar. For example, the survey programmer's only job is to look at the document with a lot of questions and then figure out how do I program that in code so that the survey becomes live, right? So they, day in and day out, they just program surveys. And there's this.
These take a while, right? Surveys take like between 20 to 40 hours just to create like a robust survey.
Exactly. It takes anywhere from 2 days to a week for them to program this. So it's despite the fact that we might have all used Typeform, Google Form, and it seems like a very simple process to do. For a market research agency, there's a lot more to do. And of course, there's one more role called data processor. And this person's only job is to look at the data that the survey has been collecting. They clean that, they sort of process it, they do a bunch of analysis on top of it. Finally, it helps sort of a research manager look at it and figure out what to do with it. So it's extremely specialized roles, which also means that there's a very specific workflow to follow. And if AI can come in and do that for you, one, you can sort of reduce the headcount, sort of improve your operating margins and how you're able to do that. And that sort of plays to the larger pattern that we are seeing, right? Today, market research is sort of reserved for folks who can really afford it. So for example, we know that a Unilever spends around 100 million globally across all their centers to do market research, right? But for a startup, we were thinking about, hey, when we were a startup who just raised pre-seed, we did not have this facility to go and sort of figure out who needs all of these things so that we can take better decisions. So for a lot of people who cannot afford it, it's still sort of something that they cannot access, right? So that's sort of been a dream for us. Hey, We'll start by automating this for the market research agency, but the broader pattern that we want to see play out in the whole industry is how does that cost come down and how does it become more accessible to more people. So that's like a blue ocean that we're super excited about.
Oh, wow. Okay, so you're trying to, at some point down the road, you'd like to even lower the cost of doing market research in the first place, so that businesses who maybe not the Unilevers of the world, but smaller companies who want to do market research, now they can actually afford to do it.
Exactly, yeah.
So how big is the opportunity here? I mean, you were talking about this as a niche market, that's how you described it, but I'm guessing it's actually a pretty sizable opportunity. Otherwise, your investors would not be so excited about investing into Metaforms.
Yeah. So the way we see it as market research as an industry is sort of like a $140 billion industry as a whole. If you look at the software spend today, they might spend on tools like Qualtrics, Forster Decipher, and so on. They might spend on SPSS, which is an IBM tool. So a lot of these archaic tools that they use today. And overall, they might spend around a $3 billion across the industry, specifically on software, right? But if you look at where the rest of the money goes, it's purely on sort of that salaried services industry, which has to make this operations happen, right? So the person who has to reach out to all of these panel participants to ask them to fill a survey. So that's again a person that you have to pay to do that. You need a sort of one person to coordinate all of these operations. You need a project manager. You need a research manager to decide what questions to ask. So all of this service is where a lot of that spend is. And that's the market that we are going after, right? So going role by role and building either AI agents that automate that particular role or sort of enhance what they can do, become co-pilots that sort of assist them in doing more things in shorter time. So that's sort of the market that we're going after specifically.
Yeah, it's going to obviously help these agencies to have better margins, right? If they're able to reduce their overhead.
Yeah.
But then at the same time too, I think ultimately in the long run, it will actually lower the cost of market research for everybody, which is great to see. Now you guys raised $9 million. This is your Series A round led by Peak 15. You also saw participation from a couple of other investors, right? Nexus Venture Partners, which is, has invested in you in the past.
Yeah.
Together Fund as well. So what is it specifically about Metaforms that has these VCs so excited to continue backing your company?
Yeah. I think a lot of it plays back to how quickly we were able to enter this industry and now sort of dominate the industry.
It's been very quick.
Yeah.
We'll talk a little bit about that, but.
So we in fact started into market research back in November last year. So that's sort of been our first discovery of, hey, there's this industry that does all of these things, and there's so much opportunity of like just services happening today that you can automate with AI, right? Since then, we've then got into some of the largest AI sort of market research agencies in the world. So there's like Ipsos, Dynata, and a lot of these larger agencies that do upwards of $1 billion in revenue every year. So extremely huge operations, and we were able to get to these folks and then do meaningful impact in terms of how they run operations. So today, a lot of their workflow depends on how we sort of build our tooling for them and so on, right? So I think that's been one of the big players in is purely how quickly we are able to get to the largest agencies, because now these are the agencies set the benchmark for the rest of the smaller agencies and how they set up their operations, what the roles are organized as, and so on. So that's been, I think, a huge player. I think it also plays to, hey, survey programming was sort of a wedge for us to get into market research. It was sort of the lowest hanging fruit for us. We see clear inefficiencies in how you write code, and we are able to automate that. But the broader picture is there are so many of these roles. So like I said, there is data processing, there is report generation, and so on. So just the opportunity of the number of roles that we can automate, there are so many things that we can do there. And eventually, if you're able to do that, and if you're already dominating that industry, it's much easier to do that as well, where you're able to say, hey, we talk to the sort of CRO, sort of the operations head of a company, and this person trusts us to sort of improve the efficiency of their survey programming team. It's very easy to then build that trust and extend it towards then doing data processing and all of these other operations that they do, which is adjacent to what they do today, right? So I think that's been a sort of big driver in the trust that we've been able to build in the industry today.
That's awesome. Sounds like you're just getting started. I'd love to go back to 2022 when the company started. All right.
I think we're back.
We're back. Sorry, guys. Internet outage. This is how it is here in India, especially. I think these kinds of things happen quite frequently. Where did you guys lose us, though? That's the question that I have.
Oh, so not so long.
Okay, perfect. So we just lost connection. Great. We'll jump right back in and we'll talk about when you were not even a teenager, 12 years old is when you started your first company. And I think a lot of people watching the stream are probably young, right? A lot of people watching are in their teens, so it's already too late for you. I'm just kidding. You started at 12. That's incredible. What was the company that you built when you were 12 years old?
Yeah. So it started out not being sort of, I never meant to sort of start a company. So, I used to go to my school in a school bus, and it's a pretty long drive. It takes around 20 minutes. And one of these days, I used to live in Chennai, by the way, at the time. So there was a huge cyclone that hit Chennai, and there was a lot of rain. So what ended up happening is our school bus was stuck in one of these bypass bridges, and we were there for an hour. So that also meant that there was no sort of communication back to the parents and all of those people who are worried that, hey, usually you're reached within 20 minutes and it's been a hour. So I think it was when I was in the bus, it was super adventurous. But when I reached back home, I saw that my parents were super worried. They had contacted all of these relatives, and the school was worried, and so on. So that sort of struck a chord with me. I was thinking about, hey, how do I solve this? Because that was also the time when sort of smartphone adoption was sort of booming in India. So all of these people had Micromax devices. It was like you could get a smartphone at like 3K, which had internet, GPS, all of these things, and it was super cheap back then. So I also remember that my school bus driver and sort of the conductor also had one of these devices. So that's when I thought, hey, I'll spend some time maybe figuring out if I can build something around this, right? So there was this, around the time, there was this project by MIT, which was around sort of a GUI tool that can help you build apps, and that seemed super interesting. I hadn't fully learned how to code, but this seemed like, hey, I can just build an app just by sort of doing dragging and dropping a few things. So I spent sort of a month on it. I started building. Initially, I started showing it to my school, and they got super excited. So I think that's where it really started seeming like, hey, this could be a business, because they had around 200 school buses, and suddenly it went from me asking them to use it in my bus to them deploying it across 200 school buses they had. So that was my first sense of scale. Just imagining that, hey, I could build something and then suddenly all of these people would use it. And 200 school buses mean that each of these buses would have 50 people. So many of these parents are actually downloading the app to look at where the bus location is. So that was super interesting for me. And that's when it seemed like, hey, I could sort of build a company around this, and I could sort of scale this to other van agencies and schools and so on.
You literally, it had a name. It was called Latera Logistics, right?
Yeah.
Or Latera Logistics.
Yeah.
And how long did you spend building this business and providing this solution to schools for school buses? Was it just isolated to your school, or did you even go beyond that?
Oh yeah, so we started with my school, and then we went to a few van agencies and so on in Chennai. So usually it's very disorganized, with every agency having around 20 vans that you could own. So that is a very predominant behavior in Chennai. So that's sort of the first market that I went after. And I think even before I read all of these books like 0 to 1, this was my first sense of building with the customer. So initially we deployed it with my school bus, and I figured out who. The conductors in the best are not super grading, so they need sort of bigger icons to know what they need to click and so on, right? So all of these problems sort of emerged one by one, and I had to tackle it one by one. But later on, when I zoomed out, it seemed like, oh, this is what product building really feels like, where you have to sort of listen to customers. In fact, the other exercise we did is I in fact traveled along with my dad in one of these school buses, not just my own, just to look at how do other people react to it, right? So just to have that sense of looking at a bus driver using this app, that gave a lot of sort of realness to what it felt like. Hey, there's a real person who's trying to figure it out, and he's sort of getting stuck on this particular screen. I have to solve it for him, right? So I think that's what made it really real. So it was a very continuous process, sort of iterating it over a year, and it got to finally a stage where a lot of schools started using it. I think there was a school in US using it, Chakota or something. There was a school in Bangalore as well, Maple Bear. So I think it was a van agency. So super interesting to see like one by one each agency sort of adopted that time.
What happened? What was the aftermath? Did you, like you said, just for a year? So I'm assuming that was it. At some point, you had to shut it down, or you sold it. What was the outcome?
Yeah, I think over time my realization was, hey, I figured out what is going to excite me in life. Hey, this is definitely what I want to do. Now I want to get really good at sort of like the technical problem solving and all of that. So I went on to then make sure that I'm going to these larger scale organizations, looking at how enterprise sales work, all of these adjacent things. Because as a founder, it's not just about sort of building things, but you also need to figure out all of these adjacent things, right? So I wanted that real world sense of, hey, how do larger organizations work? How do they manage such large teams? How do you organize teams? How do you sort of communicate between them? So I had to sort of figure out answers to all of these questions. So I went on to do that. But I always had this at the back of my head that I had to come back to sort of starting a startup, and that's when sort of Metaforms happened. In fact, the story there is, I've known Akshat for a while. I think you were also asking about, hey, he started in 2022 and so on. So I've known him for a while, and I used to, chat with him. I think I knew him through a friend in Twitter. So again, I think most of the good folks I know are through Twitter, and. So we've been communicating. He's been when he was initially building before he raised funds and so on. I used to sort of answer questions for his engineering team around how to solve this problem and so on. So later on, when I was at Eightfold, and I had felt like I learned enough about how enterprise sales are organized and so on. But when I heard that, hey, he's trying to sort of scale up this company, he needs help on the engineering side, it felt like the right moment. So I sort of chatted with him at this office, and I figured out, hey, this is sort of the right time to sort of do this together.
Okay. But at that time, it was called WorkHack, I believe, right? And so there was a very different focus. I used the Wayback Machine and saw earlier versions of the website. And so I believe what you were focusing on initially, I'm not sure if this was the case when you joined, what was enterprise generative AI. So generative AI, obviously, for consumers is a lot of fun, and you can get all kinds of crazy, interesting outcomes using these generative AI models. But for an enterprise, there's a lot of other considerations at play, right? Safety is one of them, right? Making sure that the generative AI adheres to your company's policies and all that stuff, your DNA. And so I think that was the problem that you were initially trying to solve. Why didn't that take off? Why didn't it work? What were some of the obstacles that you faced there?
Yeah. In fact, when we started, that was right around the time where ChatGPT was also in its most initial stages. So most people hadn't heard of it. There was GPT-3 and the earlier versions. So it was more of a research topic. Initially came out as API more than it being like a general public tool. So that's sort of we've sort of been on the same journey along with them, where as they evolved as a larger product that we all know today. That's sort of when we started as well. So I think initially when we started, we were super clear that today it's sort of like a playful tool that you can talk to and get interesting answers to. You can maybe ask it to do some writing tasks. It can write blogs for you. But generally, it's sort of like a fun tool to sort of play around with and ask questions to, right? But what we clearly saw is, hey, there's definitely going to be a future where it's going to be an essential part of all of these enterprises. There are definitely going to be larger adoptions for real work, not just like playful consumer sort of use cases, right? But we figured out that, hey, in order to get there, of course, there are going to be some aspects of the model that has to evolve, and that's going to be sort of what the frontier labs are going to iterate on. So the next versions are definitely going to be great at that. But we also have to then go deeper into specific industries and figure out how do you then do that adoption, right? Because that revolves a lot around fully understanding their workflow, going into sort of the depth and complexity of what are these specialized roles that have been sort of built over the multiple decades with people, with decades of experience. You need to fully understand them and then figure out a way to automate. And that's a sort of a depth of exercise that you need to do for each enterprise. So when we figured that out, we realized, hey, we need to sort of go across all of these enterprises. We need to figure out what use cases are sort of more ready for disruption at the right time. So it was also a question of the timing of each of these industries. So I think it was a very step-by-step process where we initially started by being a very generative AI-based company, where we were figuring out broader questions like how do you ground sort of AI responses to specific things, build guardrails and so on, so that you can sort of enforce rules on top of these models. The next iteration was hey, one broad use case seems to be data collection. A lot of people want to sort of collect data, and that has been not changed for a very long time. And today seems like there's a way to also interactively ask questions. So instead of having a static form that people have to fill, suddenly you can have a conversation with people and then extract data out of it, right? So that was the unlock for us. Went deeper into that, and then from there we figured out, hey, we built a farm product like Typeform. We had around sort of 30,000 users at building farms and so on. But the interesting pattern we saw is there was a peculiar, demographic, which is market research agencies who are using this, and they were super excited more than anyone else about data collection. So that was super fun for us just to figure out.
You said marketers?
Market research.
Market research, okay.
Yeah. So that made us really curious because there was also first realization that such an industry exists. So we went deeper, started talking to a lot of these people and realized, oh, these people care the most about data collection to an extent that they pay the people who are filling the surveys, right? You might pay them like $50, $1 just to take a survey. So that was like the peak of that use case. So we wanted to go deeper into that. And that's what sort of eventually led us to market research and figuring out that there's so many other problems to solve beyond just sort of like creating surveys.
Huh. So yeah, when I was doing my research into Metaforms, I guess I interpreted it more as pivoting, but it sounds like it wasn't really pivots. It was more of that you started very wide because you didn't know a lot about the space and you were sort of, and then slowly you narrowed the focus until eventually you found the thing that you are currently doing.
Yeah.
I love that process. I mean, is that something that was done intentionally, or was it just kind of a spontaneous journey that happened organically?
Right. I think it was partly intentional because I think it all comes down to being like very honest about what you know and what you don't know. So initially, I think when we started out, we were very honest that, hey, we are super young, like both me and Akshat. So we don't understand a lot of these industries to the depth that someone who's been working in that industry for a decade would have. So we definitely had to first get deeper into working with one of them, look at who's ready to work with us, who are these larger players. And largely the principle that we've been following is like go where the money is. So if there's a larger company who's trying to solve a problem, that's what we are excited about. And just that, following that principle and then starting broad helped us sort of go step by step and narrow down into something where we saw a clear opportunity. So I think that was sort of just having that principle and then following it step by step sort of really helped in narrowing down.
Okay. Now, you mentioned earlier that you have 4 out of the top 20 global market research agencies as clients now. Big congratulations. That's a huge accomplishment, especially in a very short amount of time. Like you said, you sort of decided to zero in on this specific opportunity back in November of 2024. So it's a relatively short amount of time to onboard such large clients. What's the next step? What does Metaforms need to do in order to secure the remaining 16 large global market research agencies?
Right. I think our learning has been, as long as your ROI is super clear to these agencies, it's just a matter of time to sort of crack these one by one. But I think what we've been able to do very quickly is already be sort of known for the being the one startup who's able to solve this really well. So today, even if there was an agency that we haven't worked with, they talk to a few of these other agencies they know, and they would have heard about Metaform very quickly, right? So I think that really helped. I think the other aspect is also been an industry that's been very traditional in terms of the sort of tech that they adopt. So they use tools like IBM SPSS, which was built, I think, around 1969 or so on. So it's extremely archaic tools, right? So I think what we've been able to bring to the industry is just the fact that, hey, we really, really care about this industry to an extent that we are trying to modernize it. So it's very refreshing for all of these industries to see a new player come up who's trying to solve all of these problems they've had for a very long time. And so far, they've had to depend on sort of solving it in-house, right? They would try to build an AI team internally. They would try to sort of build tooling around their processes and so on. But a lot of them wouldn't see a lot of success because it's, again, like a very small team trying to solve a larger problem. So I think just the fact that they're seeing sort of a newer age sort of startup to use AI to broadly solve that for the whole industry, that sort of helps them adopt that, right? I think the other aspect is, for every agency that we work with, usually it's a different tool that they choose to adopt initially, right? So some of them choose to do survey programming, and then they discover, hey, we also do data processing, and then they adopt that. For a lot of them, they start with data processing, and they realize, hey, we also do visualization. So it's always starts with a smaller problem, but then it expands into, hey, it also makes sense to do all of these things which are adjacent to each other. And that usually comes from the fact that all of these are extremely tied to each other. So there's a lot of network effect going on between products, right? So just because you use survey programming along with the data processing module also means that any collaboration that usually a survey programmer does with a data processor now happens through these agents between themselves, right? So just the fact that that communication bandwidth is also sort of getting internalized into the product means that now you can do greater things as a sum of sort of just adopting more number of tools, right? I think so that's a broader pattern that we are seeing, which is it's very easy to go in with a smaller product with a specific problem that might be very burning for them. But once you do that, it's very easy to then go broader and solve the full life cycle of operation that they have to do within these agencies. So it's very quick to then get to sort of all of the market research agencies doing their entire sort of automation stack.
So that's the market that you're going after right now, is these market research agencies. I'm curious though, again, just like at the beginning of the conversation, I did mention that initially when I saw the headline on your website, AI powered market research, I thought that you were serving the enterprise, the business that wants to do the market research in the first place. Then I found out that no, actually you're serving the agency that's doing that on behalf of the enterprise. And so I'm just curious to know, is there scope for Metaforms at some point in the future to also serve the enterprise and become almost like an AI powered agency in and of yourself?
Right.
Because I know that, I mean, we've already talked about this. There are vendors who actually have groups of people, right? Pools of people who fill out surveys and they have access to those people. So that is sort of potentially an obstacle for you to eventually become an AI powered agency yourself, because you actually do need to have access to those people. So maybe that answers the question, but I'd still love to understand your thoughts on this. Is that something that you might at some point explore, or is it like, no, we just want to focus on being the best possible solution for these market research agencies?
Right. And I think like one broad learning that we've had, having gone through that journey of starting broad, is anytime you start sort of into a new industry, from the outside it always looks like, hey, it's an extremely simple thing that they're doing, why don't we just sort of solve it from first principles and replace them, right? But I think one of the learnings that we've had is usually these industries have sort of historically formed for a reason. There's so much sort of nuances and complexity that these agencies actually do. So I think what we've learned is to give respect to those agencies and the industry that we are going into. So instead of saying, hey, we'll come in today and then replace you fully, what we've realized is, hey, there's so much value that you add today, but then what really doesn't work today is it's super expensive, the services that you're providing, purely because you have to have so much dependency on all of these services folks, right? So I think our broader goal is, we see a clear value in these agencies in what they do. They're really good at identifying problems, directing the brands to the right set of questions to ask. So research managers are extremely experienced in sort of figuring out what questions to ask, how do you sort of reduce bias and all of these things, right? But we want to augment these services to both do things faster and sort of reduce, go into newer markets, for example. So I was talking about sort of the blue ocean that we want to help them capture, because that is better for the industry as a whole, right? If today it's catering to all of these brands, but tomorrow it's also able to go to all of these startups, sort of helps both them and us to have a larger market as a whole than what we had today. And the second thing we are excited about is not just going to newer people, but being able to do new things that you were not able to previously, right? So today you're restricted by the set of tools that you have. You can do surveys, or you can do qualitative sort of in-person things. But suddenly now with AI, you can also talk to thousands of people, roll out voice interviews, and sort of get very quickly, within a span of few days, you can actually get qualitative responses from thousands of people, right? These were simply things that were not possible before. And what that means is also, these brands can do research at a higher volume. So instead of saying, hey, I have this quarterly goal, I have this large project, I need to sort of work with a market research agency to do that, I can now think about all of the micro problems that I have within my brand, which is, hey, today I need to decide about pricing, tomorrow I need to tweak this particular message. Can I do research for every one of these small things, and then get answers to these by working with a market research agency within a few days? So I think that's sort of like the larger dream that we are really going for.
Right now, you're processing or helping to process 1,000 surveys per month, which is 12,000 surveys per year. In the future, though, your ambition is to help process more than 100,000 surveys per year. That's a lot of surveys. I'm curious to know, what is the financial unit of measurement here? Like, how much what is a survey worth to you as a business financially?
Right. So I think on pricing, what we figured out is you need to be sort of directionally right in terms of where do customers find value in using you, and then make sure that you guys are super aligned in that, right? So what we realized is with surveys, for example, uh, today they spend on each survey. So as I said, for a survey programmer, it might take anywhere from 2 days to a week to program that. So in dollar terms, that might be anywhere from $100 to maybe $3,000 that you're spending just to have one survey program, right?
Wow. And that's just one step of the process.
Exactly, yeah. So if that is sort of your cost, our principle is, hey, we'll help you automate that, and we'll whatever sort of dollar saving that we help you do, we'll charge you 30% of that. So it's super aligned as a principle. So then you can sort of work with each agency and figure out what exactly that number is. But broadly, I think what we follow is we help create value, and then we charge sort of a fraction of that value. So we still want you to sort of win in this journey, because we we depend on you sort of growing for us to grow as well.
Okay. Now, I was just checking on LinkedIn, so I don't have the exact number of employees, but just looking at the office here, it looks like there's probably in the ballpark of like 50-ish employees, and also maybe in SF as well. You probably have a bunch of folks over there as well. What is everyone doing? I mean, what are you all focused on? How much of it is client customer experience, and how much of it is active development and sort of building Metaform's next thing and enhancing and improving the platform and the product?
Right. So in terms of the split, what we figured out is, of course, a lot of the deeper problems that we have to solve to productize this is engineering and AI problems. So that also reflects in the team composition. So around 3/4 of the team is engineering, both AI and sort of engineer SD folks, and then the rest of it is sort of customer success and AEs and so on, right? So that's sort of been the team composition. What we also realized is, in order to go deeper into one of these industries, you need to have people backing you who are experts in the industry, right? So today we also have an office in Mumbai where we hire sort of SMEs who've been doing this for a decade. So we don't say, hey, like I was saying, we don't come in and say, hey, we'll solve it from first principles. Instead, we really want to learn about this industry and then have sort of that first party information about how it's typically done, right? So that's again like a part of the team, which is like people who've been doing this for a decade. So survey programmers, data process. So they act as product managers along with us in sort of helping solve this problem. So they've been facing this problem for so long. Now they also have sort of a great engineering team backing them, and they can figure out and go solve these problems for themselves. So they sort of know the problem, and have been thinking about it for a long time. And in terms of where are we headed, so we have sort of engineering team in Bangalore, we have an SF. Now we are setting up in New York as well. So the next set of hires are going to be engineering folks in the New York, but because what we've been seeing is, in order to really empathize with users, you really need to be close with them, right? So today we've been sort of traveling to New York and SF and sort of working with these folks, market research agency folks, to figure out what their problems are. But what we've realized is it's super important to be able to be as close to these customers as possible. For the next set of hires, we want to continue building within New York itself, because that's where all of our customers are.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Rather than doing like virtual demos and onboarding, you can just send someone to their office in New York with a presentation. And I think there's a lot less friction if you're able to do that.
Exactly, yeah.
So is that largely then what the Series A is going to be used for, setting up that office in New York and onboarding clients there IRL versus doing it virtually? Or, I mean, I'm guessing the money is going to go in multiple directions, but what is the primary focus? What is the biggest spend going to be?
Right. So a large part of it is just us being a more American company, right? So again, because of that realization, we know that we have to be sort of based there. So that means hiring more engineering folks and so on. The other one has been, hey, we started with survey programming, but this is one of those industries where once they buy a software, they sort of stick to it. So I was talking to you about how they've been using this tool built by IBM back in 1969, and they're still using it, right? Which also means that today, when there's an AI wave, when there's a new unlock of what we can do for them, we have to be the first to sort of build these tools for them, and we have to sort of stick with them for the longest time, right? So again, like a large focus for us has been parallelizing and building pods that build all of these agents parallelly. So not only survey programming, but we are also able to build data processing, voice agents and sort of research managers and all of those at once. And we're able to also go to these agencies at once and say, hey, we can build that vertical stack for you so that you're able to sort of automate that entire operation stack for you.
Yeah. I think we're getting pretty close here to the end of this stream. I know we're almost at an hour. I have a couple more questions though that I wanted to ask. The first one, feel free to not comment on this, but are you likely to raise another round? Do you think you'll go out and raise a Series B? Is this like enough, and revenue will sort of get you the rest of the way to a future exit or like an IPO at some point?
Right. So today what we've been saying is, again, like our profit margins are positive, and we've been able to sort of not have a dependence on VCs just to be able to do what we're doing. But we also realize that, hey, it's not enough to just do what we're doing, but we need to quickly expand and sort of dominate this industry very quickly, right? So again, I think that ambition continues to be true, that while we are able to do what we are able to do, and we are sort of at the top of that industry already, we definitely don't want to stop here. We want to quickly sort of mobilize ourselves to solve this problem within 6 months and so on, so that we're able to quickly engulf all of these parts of automations of the operations itself. So I think that's been the dream. So I think very likely that we'll again raise another round towards the end of the year.
Okay. So any VCs who are watching, it's open season. Also, another question is, if anyone's watching who is looking for work right now, what roles are you hiring for?
Right. So we are primarily hiring for, again, ST folks and AI engineers. I think we are at this cusp of sort of defining what is going to be the future of this market research industry. It's sort of like a smaller industry compared to, let's say, like a Salesforce doing, sales automation and so on. But that also means that we are this one startup who's going to define what that is going to look like for the next 40 years or so on, right? Just like an IBM did like 40 years ago. Now it's going to be like Metaforms' turn to define what all of these 10,000s of people employed within these companies are going to do, what tools they're going to use, what experience they're going to have. So I think we are super excited about sort of building that experience for such a large sort of industry, and we are super excited to sort of have more people be on that journey. So it's primarily sort of ST and AI roles that we are hiring today.
Okay. Now a couple of fun questions here at the end. First of all, we've got a bunch of books here. So I wanted to know, do you have any book recommendations, books that you recently read that you think people should read?
If I had to pick one, I would probably pick this book called Dragon's Egg. So this is sort of like a fiction, but it's very grounded in physics, and it was actually written by a physicist. So I usually love reading books like those because they push us to imagine things that are possible but are sort of really distant from what is true. So this is actually a story of sort of life evolving on a neutron star and how sort of humanity evolves to see them. So I think just pushes us to sort of, when you look at a very different reality, it just sort of brings you back into sort of thinking from first principles and not sort of taking what you see for granted, but always sort of reimagining what could be possible. So I think that if I had to choose one book, I think I would recommend that.
All right, Dragon's Egg. And then my last question here, what's the story with the elephants? Because they're everywhere. I mean, you guys can't see it, but in the office, there's like at least 20, 25 elephants scattered throughout, not just the plush toy, but like these kinds of elephants, right? They're pretty much everywhere in the office. I just wanted to know, is it just a mascot, or is there a deeper story to it?
Oh yeah, so this sort of resembles, if you see it from the side, the logo of Metaforms. So it's sort of like an M. But broadly, I think it also came from the fact that we, like the entire team, like really loves elephant. We were sort of going to sort of look at these safaris where we wanted to adopt an elephant and so on. So I think it broadly comes from just our fascination and sort of how much we adore elephants. So when we started a company, we're like, hey, this has to be sort of like the representation of who we are.
Sure. And sort of grounding it in India, even though you're going after American customers as well. India's, I think there's probably more elephants here than hardly anywhere else in the world. Actually, I'm probably very wrong about that. I'm sure there's tons of them in Africa, but cool. Anything else you want the world to know before we wrap things up here?
No, I think we pretty much covered it. Super fun conversation, and sort of been a huge fan of your show. So super interesting to be on the show.
Oh, thanks so much. All right. Thank you for doing this. It was great, and wishing you guys all the best in the future of Metaforms, and also, I guess, at some point very soon, your Series B round as well.
Yeah, thank you so much.
All right. And thanks everyone for tuning in. If you have any feedback, please do leave it on a comment on the YouTube video version of this stream or on X as well. Okay, catch everybody in the next one.